podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and in this episode, we're in conversation with one of Great Britain's great riders of the last couple of decades. David Howe joins us to talk about his career on the track. He raced for a number of Britain's top clubs, including the Peterborough Panthers, where he won the Elite League title in 1999. He was also one time a British under-21 champion. He's ridden for Kings Lynn, Wolves, Oxford, Scunthorpe, Glasgow and Berwick. And of course, as I mentioned, currently is now working on the technical side of Speedway, supporting one of the top riders in the Premiership League and in the Championship, Ryan Douglas. So we'll get to know more about what happens in the world of Speedway after the vans have left the track and the work that goes on behind the scenes to prepare bikes for the next meeting. We'll also hear about his escapades in the Speedway Grand Prix series, because David Howe had 3 goes in the Speedway Grand Prix, including being involved in that awesome occasion at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, as it was then, in 2007, the day that Chris Harris won the British Speedway Grand Prix Championship, and what it was like to be involved on that occasion. So all that and much more, plus we'll get an idea of what his dream meeting would look like as well in our Speedway Paradise section at the end of our chat. But it gives me great pleasure to welcome to Humans of Speedway, David Howe.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great that you can join us, and looking forward to hearing you, as I know many people are over the course of this episode. Starting at the beginning then, what was your route into Speedway? Because you had family connections already with the sport. I think everybody seems to have a family connection with Speedway in some form or another, and that's how they get into it. But what was your journey into Speedway?
Mine was, my dad raced grass track, so that's where my first entry point was. And I think the first time I went to Speedway, it was actually, I remember it did get rained off. It was at Long Eaton. And then I think next year maybe I went again. And up till then I wanted to be a grass track rider when I grew up, and that's what I wanted to do. And as soon as I saw Speedway, that was it then. I'd probably be 4 or 5 years old at the time. Wow,
so early. But that thing that I will keep mentioning it, both on this podcast and the British Speedway one as well, that how important it is for people to take their friends to the Speedway, because that is like 99% of the people I've spoken to, that's how they found it. They didn't see it on an advert or the news or anything like that. A friend or a family member or whoever it was, in one form or another, took them to their first meeting.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things with Speedway. You can advertise it, you can do what you want, but there's nothing, from the outside, I suppose it can look a bit repetitive, or if you don't really understand, some of us don't understand the rules even now, but if you can get, Peter Oakes always told me you needed to get a fan to come 3 times. And if you get them to come 3 times, they'd come pretty much forever. And obviously you've got to pick and choose your meetings and hope it's the weather's kind and there's no major hold-ups and if you can drag somebody along and it's a good meeting, you'd like to think you're gaining a fan there.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about Peter Oakes in a minute, because he was obviously very important in the early part of your career. And I think when we spoke to Peter Oakes as well, he spoke about you and those other riders of that time who are, well-known names now. But at the age of 5 then, obviously your dad's involved in grass track, but what was your first bike? Can you remember what the bike was that you had and stuff like that?
I didn't get my first bike till I was 9. It took me a lot of years of pestering my dad, because obviously my dad was not at that time, certainly wasn't at a high level, but he was still racing and still enjoying it, and I was going along, and there wasn't really a junior scene as such back then. The first bike I got, I remember my dad would have been racing down at Bristol Grass Track, and we picked it up. It got delivered by RTS Roger Taylor, and it was a 125 Honda Speedway bike. And obviously I sat on that bike all day, didn't get off it. And then after the meeting, Dad spoke to the organisers, and then I managed to have a wobble round the grass track on a Speedway bike after the meeting. That was my first ride.
Wow. Okay, and obviously a ride that you remember as well. But grass track, I think a few riders have mentioned this, especially ones that have started on grass track and then they go on to a Speedway track, and it's like, I mean, you've already sort of touched on it, but it's a different, the fact that it's like riding on a billiard table compared to riding on some of the ploughed fields and stuff that you might encounter on grass track. It's very similar engines and same engines and that kind of stuff, but obviously a different discipline entirely.
Yeah, it's totally different. I think I always thought a good Speedway rider makes a very good grass track rider, not necessarily the other way around. I did it the other way. I didn't do much junior grass track. I wasn't really interested in the way it was when I was young, because it was very much two-stroke engines, knobbly rear tyres, there's no sliding, and I wanted to slide my bike, so I did about a season and a half on junior grass track, and then I packed up and concentrated on Speedway until I was a lot older, and then I obviously came back to grass track and did what I did. But I was always more junior, riding junior Speedway than junior grass track. But like you say, the difference in tracks, you jump off a grass track, even as an adult, I do a grass track and I go to a Speedway on the next night. It's like, people are saying, the track's a bit rough. I should have rode yesterday.
Yeah. I think certainly like tracks like Birmingham have benefited from having a few grass trackers in their side this year, maybe in that league.
Yeah, well, you can see obviously the way Bomber. It seems like the worse the conditions are. It was at the playoff semi-final at Wolverhampton. The worse they get, the better Bomber gets. So yeah, you can definitely tell he's had a background on some gnarly tracks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving a few years further on, around 15, wasn't it, when you first got involved with Peterborough Panthers, and that was the start of the 1997 season. Sort of as young as you can be part of a team like that, I suppose, as well. Tell us about the Thundercats, because the Peterborough Thundercats, we spoke to Peter Oakes quite a while, over a year ago now. So if people are new to this podcast, search back to that one, because Peter's stories are immense, because he's had, there's nothing and nobody that he doesn't know in Speedway, I don't think. Former manager of Ivan Major and involved in setting up so many clubs, and he was involved in Peterborough. And a great team that he had there, the Thundercats, because there was Simon Stead and Ollie Allen and some well-known names from Speedway now, and it seemed like a good crew together, and and it's a nice time. And I know that Peter fondly remembers that era, I think, in his career.
It was fantastic for us, but it kind of that team pretty much had been building for a couple of years. I started at Peterborough midway through '94, and from even then, Peter was very much right. We need to get the help the juniors, because a lot of tracks you'd go to, even if you could get a ride, you'd be lucky. You'd be sitting there waiting to go out, and suddenly go, oh no, we've changed our minds. Where Peter was the opposite. We used to get rides before the meeting, midway through the meeting, after the meeting, and I started in '94, and I think Simon, I'd met Simon at Sheffield, because I used to ride at Sheffield after the meeting on a Thursday, and I invited him. I said, come down to Peterborough, and it's really good. And Ollie came a bit later, but there was also Paul Clues. There was a load of us, and then that year in '97, when Peterborough joined what was called the Amateur League, then I think. It was just natural that all us group would be the team. And there was a couple of other riders. Ross Brady joined us midway through, but it was just such a young group of lads who weren't there racing for money. There was, at that time, even though myself and Simon, we had a few years where we were quite competitive and fierce rivals, there was none of that in the team then. We were just riding the bikes, and we just wanted to win. And it was a great year. I can't remember exactly how many meetings that there were, but I know we lost one at Exeter and drew one at Mildenhall and won every other one. And it was just for a group of 15, 16-year-olds, it was a fantastic experience. And, you know, we all owe Peter a debt of gratitude for giving us that introduction into League Speedway that he did for us.
Yeah, and you were at Peterborough for a good few years from then as well, weren't you? So it wasn't like you were just there for the one season. That was really your kind of formative education, I suppose, to league racing and you know, progressing into the sport and coming under 21 champion as well, which is a great thing to have on your CV.
Yeah, I think I stayed until the end of 2001. Yeah, we won the league in 97 and 98 and 99. We won the treble in the Elite League, and it just seemed at that time for me what every team I was in turned to gold, and it was fantastic. And even the next few years, I think we won the Knockout Cup and other things. But unfortunately for me, I liked the old Peterborough track, and they changed it in 2001 to hold the World Under 21 final, mainly for myself, but obviously Simon was still quite connected with the club, even though I think he was racing for Sheffield at the time, but still owned by Peterborough. And as soon as I did one lap around the new track on press day, I came in and said, I absolutely hate it. And I never liked it since. And I pretty much decided midway through that season I was going to try somewhere else. I didn't realise at the time I'd never come back. But the management had changed. There's been a few different promotions, and it just wasn't the same Peterborough that I knew at the time. It just felt right for me to move. But again, I had quite a success. Like I say, I had my one and only under 21 championship while I was racing for Peterborough. So I had some great memories there.
What was the change to the track then? What made it to the point that you suddenly started hating it? What was the?
Peterborough was always what they did. They pretty much drew a line 2 meters inside the track and cut 2 meters off, so it became more of a circle. It was very narrow and quite square, and it can be a bit daunting coming off the corners, but. Kevin Hawkins, in one of my very first press days, I think 95 it would have been, when my first full year as a junior at Peterborough, he said, you got to watch Mick Poole, watch how he does this round the old wheel over the grass as it used to be at Peterborough. So I watched him and I thought, right, I'll get that. And I think I pretty much spent a good 6-7 years not coming off that line much. And when they changed it, it took away my strength at Peterborough, and it just became like a circle. And even though it makes better racing, I'd say it is a better track. It just wasn't my Peterborough that I grew up on.
And so you needed to find yourself a tighter track then?
It wasn't really going to a tighter track or a bigger track or anything like that. It was a pure accident. I ended up going to Wolverhampton. I was in a test match in England versus Denmark, I believe, at Wolverhampton. And I was very, very, it was only Peter Oakes really that I didn't join Wolverhampton when I was 16, because I used to ride there. And I used to get on very well with Derek, who used to run the second half there, and he wanted me to join Wolves. But I really felt I owed Peter a lot. And so I stayed, obviously went to Peterborough, but midway through that 2001 season, I was standing watching a heat in that test match, and CVS, who even to this day, CVS is still the boss to me. You don't ring CVS up and have a whinge at him. Well, I didn't anyway. It was like the proper gaffer, and he stood next to me, and he was just talking, and I said, I wouldn't mind riding here every week. And he went, well, come and see me at the end of the year and let's make it happen. And that was it. And, at the end of the year, I joined Wolverhampton and spent many, many happy years there.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the names then that you were joining at Wolverhampton, who would be in the team around that 2002, 2005 era? Because Wolves always put out a good team. They never have an off year, do they?
No, 2002 was the year we won the league. It was the first year of the playoffs. And there would be Michael, who was Carlson then, but Max at 1, myself at 2. I think it would have been, there was Paul Hurry, Adam Skornicki, Peter Carlson, and then we had Chris Neath and Lee Dickin, I think, doubling up, and Daniel Nermark.
Peter Carlson's he's one of the iconic Wolves riders, isn't he? That was there for so many years and all, and it's so much to the point that he kind of developed a bit of a Wolverhampton accent by the end, didn't he?
Yeah, and he was probably one of the most influential riders on my career, because he's very much in my way of thinking, where if I'm good enough to win a race, I'm good enough to win a race. I don't need to lie and tell ill truths to get it. And Peter would always, I'd ask Peter, what sprocket he was running and this, that, and the other. And sometimes I was racing against him in Sweden or a World Championship event. He'd still tell me. And it was very, very helpful, especially around Wolverhampton. Michael was phenomenal those few years, but he was hard to ride with, very, very difficult to ride with, because he was just so fast. But Peter would take the time to educate me and say, this is how these are the lines to ride around Wolverhampton and whatnot. So he was brilliant.
Tell us about the Monmore circuit, because it is a track that, there is a specific skill to riding it. You need to know exactly where to put the bike to get the best out of it, don't you? Just explain what the trick is, really, for the benefit of fans, as to how to get the best out of the track, and how would we know if a rider has got it just right? Because as well, you're not just an Wolves rider. You are now still involved with Wolves. I have been this last season. You've been mechanicking with Ryan Douglas, so you've been helping him out as well through the course of this season. But what is the trick to Monmore?
Yeah, the Carlson corridor, as it was affectionately known as. I don't think it's quite as tricky as it was 15 to 20 years ago. Whether it's engines or tyres or whatnot, I don't know. But it was very narrow, the bit that you needed to hit and hit correctly. Now it's a bit wider. If you missed it by a couple of centimetres, you didn't get that slingshot as you get. But I was always quite happy at Wolves. I always knew what I was going to do. As I came out of Bend 4, I was either going to... You had to, in your head, make a literal decision. I'm going to go tight or I'm going to run wide, but not get caught in the middle. So I was quite happy to lose plenty of time coming into the bend, come in slow, but if you hit that spot coming off Bend 2 correctly, it was like you hit the turbo button. Now, I see it with Ryan, obviously. He gets it and he hits it, but where if you miss it, you don't lose, where I think 20 years ago, if you didn't hit it right, maybe it's because in general riders are riding faster now. I don't know, but Wolverhampton, it's definitely, if you can get that Bend 2 thing correct, it's worth probably 4 bike lengths at the end of the straight. I don't know why. Nobody really knows why it is, but it does.
Wow, and such fine margins as well as there. I think probably would surprise a lot of people that a couple of centimetres. Something as simple as that can make such a big difference to how you come out of that lap,
Yeah, like I say, that's why you used to have to pretty much be, as I'm coming down before the start and finish line, right, I'm going for it. I'm going to do this. Because if you missed it then, if you came in that little bit too hot, a little bit too fast, and you missed it, you could lose out. I used it obviously to try and pass. It was, at the time, it was quite difficult to get on to that sweet spot. But if I was in front, I'd let the bike run off Bend 2 because you can keep the smooth. But then I'd also use it as a defence mechanism. If I've got a rider who was really pressuring me, I'd do two laps running wide, and then I'd park it in the middle of Bend 1. And you'd hear them suddenly zooming up the inside of you, and suddenly there's a bike there, and you just take off and go. So it was good for passing, it still is, and it was also a good defence move as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to know, because I think a lot of fans, obviously anybody who's never ridden a bike around that circuit won't know, just quite how precise you have to be, not just on that circuit, but on many other circuits. You know, they all have their quirks, don't they? Wherever you go, there's tricks to them. Even if it's a fast track like Bellevue or Sheffield, you know, there is certain places where you need to be at a certain time.
Yeah, I say Wolverhampton's a strange one because it's a small track but rides quick. When you go out on Wolves at the first time of the year, you go, oh, I didn't realise it was this tight, but it rides quick. Yeah, but then you got tracks like Sheffield, you say. It took me years to crack Sheffield, that back straight.
It's not really a straight though, is it? That's the thing.
No, but Sheffield riders make straights out of it, I tell you. You know, when you've got Simon Stead bombing up down the inside of you, down that back straight, he seems to be making a good straight. And it does, yeah, let's say they've all got the little quirks. You know, the best thing, a lot of things is good from a fan point. If you look on Google Maps, you can actually see, like say Sheffield, you don't really see it from the ground, but if you look at it from the air, you go, wow, that is a proper D. And yeah, you can sometimes look at the tracks and go, oh, right, yeah, that's why we have to do that and take that line, etc.
David Howe, my guest on this episode of Humans of Speedway. And next, we're turning our attention to the Grand Prix series. What's it like to race in front of a packed Millennium Stadium in Cardiff? David Howe has been there, seen it and done it, and we'll talk about that next on Humans of Speedway. This is Humans of Speedway, part of the Sports Social Podcast Network. And if you check out sport-social.co.uk, you can find all sorts of sporting podcasts for pretty much any sport you care to mention, including Speedway and the official British Speedway podcast. Check it out at your leisure. In the episode that we're on right now, we're speaking with David Howe, who has ridden for some of British Speedway's biggest clubs, but he's also ridden on the world stage as well, including in that iconic fixture that is the British Grand Prix at Cardiff. It's an amazing occasion and a fantastic thing to say that you've done and that you've been there, seen it and done it. Tell us about your GP experiences. Yeah,
obviously the first one at Cardiff didn't last very long. It was the old format. You know, I think I maybe had 3 rides. No, I think I had 2. But yeah, it was over quite quick, and it was a great experience. But it was a bit draining. You know, the whole thing, being at Cardiff and whatnot. But then I was lucky. I think I was 3rd or 4th reserve for the Grand Prix in 2003 because I was in the Grand Prix Challenge the year before, and there was a few injuries, and I got a ride in Kruško in Slovenia, and I took what I learned and the mistakes from Cardiff, and I had quite a decent Grand Prix really for there. And I think I made it to Heat 18. Yeah, made it to the next round, so to speak, and I really enjoyed that. That was a brilliant experience. And then obviously I rode again in the wild card spot in 2007 at Cardiff, and that was great because that was I felt I earned that wild card because of how the wild card qualification was at the time.
It is Speedway on a whole new level, and particularly Cardiff being, I think everybody would agree, the biggest Speedway fixture on the calendar. Maybe some polls might disagree and say that the one in Warsaw is, but obviously Cardiff is a massive event, and it's been on the calendar the longest as well in terms of the big stadium fixtures that they've got on the calendar, and great that it's back, of course, as well. But speaking to other riders that have been there, seen it and done it as well, we spoke to Chris Lewis, spoken to Scott Nichols, and they all say that the whole occasion is just, mind-boggling and quite intimidating as well to go out and ride in front of such a massive crowd on the day.
Yeah, I mean, the first Cardiff Grand Prix, it just went by. I didn't. Everything was just too much for me, and the 2007 one, I probably went in a bit too relaxed. Really, I thought, right, I'm possibly not going to get a chance like this again. I'm going to enjoy it, soak it up, and what will be on track. And I did. I really, really, really enjoyed it. Made a few mistakes on track. I think I got 5 points. think I threw away a couple for hitting it was still quite rutty actually it was very rutty that year. It was the year Bomber won.
He's number 19 it is, and Harris is in good shape there. Hit the first turn as Gollop comes down the outside. Gollop's going wide, Locker, but Harris has managed to hold on as David Howe goes close. And now Gollop round the outside, but Chris Harris has got out of shape there. Unexpected chance for him. And it's Great Britain 1-2 right now. Because David Howe is second, not for long though. Oh, Gollop through there. David Howe made a mistake just at the wrong moment. That allowed Gollop through.
Probably threw away a couple of points, stupid points. But I came away from that when nobody can take that experience away from me.
Lifted on the roll! What a result for British Speedway! Chris Harris has got the win, and David Howe has relegated Antonio Lynn back to the back, and that gives Scott Nichols a chance.
From getting there to machine examining to walking around the pits, looking at the ride, doing it, I made sure I enjoyed it and soaked it up, and it's a memory that, like I say, nobody can take away from me, and I've got forever.
And what a GP to be involved in as well. I think it's probably the Grand Prix that gets mentioned more than any at Cardiff, where Bomber won, and a fantastic occasion for British Speedway, and you being a British Speedway rider and also being part of that and having a hand in it, I suppose, as well. What do you take away from those kind of occasions, though, as a rider? Is it that you pick up tips from having seen how the world's best go about their business, or is it just like a general enthusiasm for the sport that you become reinvigorated for it, maybe having been part of an event like that?
I think main thing is like the enthusiasm thing. You just get swept away with it, and you see these guys who are your heroes anyway, and you see how they operate, and if you keep your eyes and ears open, you pick things up. But another thing is, I always felt after every Grand Prix I'd done, I was always a little bit sharper the next day. Next meeting, I always have a really good meeting. So I think they're the best riders in the world riding at their best. So even if you're not up there with them, the next meeting you do is not going to be as hard. So I think it does. I think it just for a certain while, I think you have a bit of a GP high maybe, and you're running that adrenaline for the next couple of meetings.
And then do you get to celebrate in Cardiff afterwards with the fans? Did you do all that?
Me, no, because I always raced in the Welsh Open the next day. So
right, yeah.
So I had to keep myself reasonably fit.
Yeah, keep yourself out of Chippy Alley. That's the main thing. And then back to the league again. You had a number of spells with Wolves. You had that 2002, 2005, and then you did 2007, 2008. But in between time, you rode elsewhere as well, and you rode for Oxford, which is a team we're hearing a little bit about again now. That they may well be on the way back next year, which will be obviously a great addition to have the name of Oxford back in Speedway, whichever league they end up riding in. But again, a quite a historic team with some of the names that have ridden there before, not least Hans Nielsen, of course, and another nice little track that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I always liked Oxford. Certainly for me, the season didn't start off particularly well, but pretty much from midway through the year, I had a pretty decent year, but the team was struggling. It was hard, and the crowd dropped. For a while we couldn't win a match, but at the end of the year, we didn't finish bottom. In the end, I think it was Arena Essex ended up taking the wooden spoon. So it was great. I loved riding with Todd Wiltshire. He was brilliant, and it was a good experience. And I've always liked the Oxford track, always did as an away rider. It was a shame the next year. Obviously, they folded, but hopefully, like I say, the noises are looking good. It's a great little stadium, and you can see they've got a lot of volunteers working hard to try and get it back to its former glory.
But great to have some of these names rumoured to be coming back, and of course, Workington. There's talk about maybe they might get some kind of operation back together as well. So, and then Bradford have got this track in there now that hasn't been used yet, but I'm sure there'll be no shortage of riders looking to line up to have a go on there if ever that came back into action for Speedway. So, for all the for all the doom and gloom that there might be around. I think, there are some promising shoots of positivity maybe over the next year or two.
I hope so. We obviously have to wait and see what happens. I think we say it every year. Well, this is a critical winter and whatnot. But I think British Speedway is reaching a point of where something's going to have to happen, whether it's a long-term plan or whatever. But what I've noticed, being obviously around tracks this year, there seems to be two different sides. You've got the sides that are really, really struggling, i.e., Birmingham, the Newcastles, the Eastbournes, and then some of them that like, I was at Peterborough a few weeks ago, and I haven't seen a crowd like that for years. Wolverhampton, I don't think since the restrictions were lifted, I don't think they've been bad crowds. Leicester has certainly been good. So it definitely seems to be two sides of the story. They're either doing okay or doing well, or really, really struggling, and I don't know why. I find it very disheartening in a way that a city the size of Birmingham can't find 1,000 people to go and watch Speedway. And I don't know what the key is, but certainly it's a little bit disheartening.
You spent probably your longest part of your career riding for Scunthorpe, actually, and you spent a long time racing there, which again is a track that not every rider seems to get on with. And I've spoken to a few riders in the past, and I can't remember exactly who it was, but it might have been Sam Masters actually, who said that he hoped that the playoff final didn't take him to Scunthorpe on the final day. I'm sure it was him.
Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely love Scunthorpe. I probably wouldn't like it how it's prepared at the moment. It's a bit too slick for what I would have liked. But I also like the fact that it was always over watered. It used to be quite deep, and it took a few heats to get used to it. And then you'd get riders. I was in my pit bay. I was nearest the track, and the number ones had popped their head around the corner. I remember people like Shane Parker going, "Oh, how do you ride this track every week?" And I'd go, "Right, yeah, that'll do me. I've got you already." And it just I dropped down from the top flight because I'd had a difficult year in 2008 for one reason or another. And I looked at the amount of meetings that I could get for Scunthorpe and the amount of meetings I get for Wolverhampton. And it was more than double the meetings for Scunthorpe on about half the money, I'd say. But I thought I'd score 2/3 more amount of points. So I thought I'll be sharp, I'll be racing, and that year for Scunthorpe, I think I scored something like 590 something points, and I was on the bike all the while, different tracks, and towards the end of the year, I really clicked around Scunthorpe, and it just became a fun track for me. It was probably the one track, apart from Wolverhampton, where I could actually pass riders and miss the start for fun, which I've never known my passing prowess. But Scunthorpe was a track I could do, and I just used to enjoy riding it.
And so, were you just purely riding for Scunthorpe at that time? Then, in what was the second tier, what is now the championship level, of course, because obviously now a lot of riders are doubling up. I think it was all except about 6 or 7 riders, I think, at one point in the season were doubling up across the two leagues. Was that something that you dabbled in at all?
See, I never really got a chance to double up. I only doubled up for about a month or so for Kings Lynn in 2012 when I got injured. My average was always too high in the Elite League to double down, because at the time I think it was a 50%. So if I had a 6.5 point average, I couldn't double up because my average was over 12 in the Premier League, and I was never a fan of it. Probably because I was a bit jealous that all these riders are getting all these meetings, and I was having to get on a flight to Sweden on a 4 o'clock on a Tuesday morning after racing at Wolverhampton when I could be in bed and then go into X, Y, Z on a Trelawney or something, in England. But it's a necessity now. But from a rider's point of view, like I think there should be more meetings personally, like it was, but it's the modern way we are. But yes, you have to run the bikes, and they cost money to run, and you can put methanol in and oil and all that. But they still cost the same to buy. So if you think if you can do 60 meetings, say in England, on 2 or 3 bikes, or do 20 meetings in England on 2 or 3 bikes, obviously there's the financial thing there. And then also, if you're doing Sweden and Poland, or you have to have a full set of equipment, vans, everything, mechanics in those countries. So it's not, yes, you're getting perhaps 20 meetings in Sweden, perhaps 20 meetings in Poland, so you add up to 40, 50, 60 meetings. But your outlay's doubled, because you've got to, you can't just do it on 3 bikes, 1 toolbox, 1 van, etc. You've got to have everything. So the doubling up thing for a rider is brilliant, because he gets to do all those meetings on one set of kit. And it is very expensive. So, I see it from both sides, from a rider's perspective, and from a mechanic's perspective as well. You need to be on those bikes and riding, and they need to be making money, because it's very expensive to run, and the money's not as strong as it used to be, for sure. So the only way they make money is by racing.
And a lot of people will say, well, we need one big league, which has been mentioned, I don't know how many times, if you look on social media. One big league is the solution. But unfortunately, we don't have enough riders to fill all of the spots in all of those teams at the minute. And whilst there is youth coming through, they're not all up to full league standard yet, are they? So it's going to take time to cover all that.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to take a long time. Like I say, I'm not a massive fan. I'm not even particularly a massive fan of, and this is going to sound very hypocritical, I'm not even a particular fan of being able to ride for different teams in different countries, because it makes it hard for people to understand. But riders need to do it, obviously. So that is just something that is there. But I don't like the fact that you can ride for two different clubs in England. It just makes it difficult for new people to get their head around, and we've got to attract new people to the sport. But the only way you're going to do that is by getting more riders, and that means a program of juniors, and it's not a 2-minute job. It's a 10-year job. So doubling up's here to stay for. While the clubs stay open as they are, doubling up's going to stay.
You ended your career at Berwick Bandits, which always, and we've spoken on this podcast to Dennis before, and always a lot of good things said about Berwick. It's a nice sort of family atmosphere club. It always comes across as, and nice people running it, and must have been a fun time to round off your career racing.
Oh, Berwick. Even now when I go there, it's like putting a pair of comfy slippers on. It's family, and obviously I'd been out of the sport. I'd retired through my shoulder injury, really, nearly 2 years before I joined Berwick, and I was just going to have a bit of a play on grass track again. And I think Berwick got an absolute thumping at Scunthorpe, and I think Scott and Jamie got that drunk after the meeting. They decided it was a good idea to sign me, and it just turned out to be a marriage made in heaven almost. I fitted in brilliantly there. The team, the management, the fan. It was. I've certainly never been in a losing team that had so much fun, and the team spirit was amazing. Yeah, every ride you had, there'd be at least 2 Berwick riders at the pit gate waiting for you, to cheer you on. It was just amazing, and I'm so pleased I did those 2 years for Berwick. I certainly didn't ride nowhere near my best, but that wasn't why I was there, and I retired happy and not injured. And the reason why I retired, really, one of the main reasons, such two good seasons with Berwick off the track, I was petrified of doing another one and not enjoying it as much. So I thought I'll quit while I'm ahead. And I've obviously got a few opportunities elsewhere within the sport at the time, but I thought I can't see me ever having as much fun as I've had this year, so I'm going to stop.
Well, sounds as good a time as any. But you are still involved in Speedway, as much as you were probably as a rider, because now you work on the mechanical side and you supported a few riders since you finished racing, and at the moment you are working with Ryan Douglas, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but you're working very closely with Ryan Douglas on his bikes, and I know you're going to tell us a little bit more about what's involved in that. But it was Nikolai Busk-Jakobsen, the first rider that you got involved in. How did the conversation come about? How did you find yourself working still very closely in Speedway, but just doing everything except ride the bike?
Yeah, I never had a full-time mechanic, really. I had people who, I had a long-time mechanics who came with me to the tracks. Dan, he helped me for a long time, and obviously my dad was around. But I always did my own bikes, washed my own bikes, built my own bikes, did everything. And it was hard work, racing and doing it. So Nikolai asked me, I think I was at Leicester. I was at Leicester watching the meeting, and Nikolai was obviously my teammate. He was guesting for Leicester, and I'd noticed something on the track in Heat 1, and I just ran down to the pits and said, Nikolai, blah, blah. And I ended up staying with him all meeting. I wasn't mechanicking, I was just with him. And then he said to me, I'm at Poole next week, can you come and help me? So I did that. I did Somerset with him, and then over the next year, I helped the Berwick lads out if they were at Leicester or something like that. And I remember helping Aaron and helped Jai quite a lot. And it just felt something I wanted to do. I'm one of them idiots who actually quite likes washing bikes. Maybe not washing, but I like the end result. And it was just, I thought I'm still involved in the sport. It's not going to cost me any money, and I'm not going to get hurt. So it sounded pretty good. Because at the end of 2017, I had a crash on a long track in Holland, and I remember sitting up in the track and going, "What are you doing? I think it's best time to stop doing this." And the mechanicking, I thought I've got all the. Okay, I'm not racing, but I'm still involved, and I race through the rider I'm helping. I probably get more nervous as a mechanic than I did as a rider. But as I say, I'd like to think that I can certainly feel what he feels still. The feeling's still there. So when he explains something to me, I know how the feeling is getting through the bike. So hopefully I can, understand and translate and, do things with the bike that need to do to help it.
Yeah, it must. As you say, it's that thrill of racing, but without any of the control that you have over the bike. You're kind of just willing him to do
pretty much how I
No. But I suppose it's still that buzz, isn't it? Of you're there to win. You got that sense of occasion turning up. You're still getting the bikes out of the van, and as you say, you've got all the excitement of Speedway, but with none of the risk of finding yourself in the fence at the end of it.
And you still have all the emotions. When Ryan wins, I'm buzzing. When he has a bad one, I'm down. When he has a crash, I'm worried, and it's still all there. I must admit, I found with Nikolai the transition from being teammate to employee quite difficult. It was almost like I was still racing in the team, and then he'd say something to me, and I go, "Well, talk to me like that for?" And I go, "Oh, hang on, I work for him." It was where with Ryan, we get on very, very well. Former teammates, obviously, at Scunthorpe, but I thought I don't need to be his friend. We don't need to hang out. We very rarely see each other, to be honest. Myself and Ryan, he just turns up at the track and says hello, and when we work together during the meeting, and he goes off and lives his life. But like I said, we don't have to be friends. but we have to have a bit of respect for each other. And I think myself and Ryan do, and it seems to work.
Talk us through what happens in the bit that we don't see as fans. The day after a meeting, the bikes have been packed up into the back of the van, you've driven off, had a night's sleep, wake up in the morning, no doubt filthy bikes in the back of the van or whatever. What is the day like for you then after a meeting? What's the work that goes on to get yourself ready for the next one?
On a normal day after a meeting, everybody does it differently. I'm probably a bit more thorough than a lot of mechanics. Maybe it's the ex-rider in me, I don't know. But and again, I always when I started being a mechanic, I said I want to try and be the mechanic that I would have wanted. So I go a bit ballistic, and everything gets clean. So I would start off. I get all the toolboxes, the kit boxes, all that stuff done, because I hate it when you go, oh, I'll finish now, and then you realise you haven't cleaned the kit box out and done all the oils and everything. So I do that, and then I'll strip the bike, and I tend to strip quite a lot off the bikes. I do all that inside, do all the clutch plates, the carbs, wash all the parts and bits and pieces, and then wash the bike, clean the bike down, obviously replace any parts that need doing, and rebuild them. And for me, probably, if I'm going to do it properly, it's probably an 8 to 10 hour job to get everything done.
Wow, that's quite a lot of preparation. 8 to 10 hours of stripping bikes down and rebuilding them for the next meeting to get them gleaming again. But obviously that attention to detail that you've been putting in for yourself and Ryan Douglas has been working. He's had a good season, hasn't he, I think?
Yeah, well, my aim for Ryan is for just not to have one foreseen engine failure. Obviously, you can't say if he had a primary chain snap at Wolverhampton at the start of the year, and the primary chain was 2 meetings old, where you probably get 6, 8, 10 meetings out of a primary chain, no problem, depending on how, especially around Wolverhampton. So that's an unforeseen engine failure. But I don't want anything to fall off his bike. I don't want a rear chain to come off. I don't anything stupid that's my fault. And touch wood, so far that's happening. Obviously, I can't control what he does on the bike, but my job is to make sure that when that bike hits the track, it's done properly, it's set up right how he wants. Ryan's very good at. He doesn't really get involved. I wouldn't have wanted to work for myself. I'd have been fingers in and doing it. Ryan's he'll just say, everything all right? And I'll go, yeah, no worries. I think the only thing he does is really he will change his ignition timing. So I think that's quite a personal thing. A lot of the time a rider will fiddle around with the ignition timing and probably end up roughly back where they were started with, but it's a mental thing that you've made a change or whatnot. So, but I do everything else. I even set Ryan's clutches up, to be honest. Which again is, I'd say 99% of riders do that themselves, but just something I do. And he just then sits on the bike and rides it. But for me, it's making sure everything's right. He doesn't get excluded on 2 minutes, and my biggest fear that he runs out of fuel. I'd rather he get excluded for 2 minutes than run out of fuel. So I've noticed a lot of ex-riders who are mechanics do it. We'll check the fuel 5 times, 10 times between a race to make sure we've done it. That's the first thing I do when he comes back in as well, because I'd rather me not have the back wheel sorted and him get excluded for 2 minutes than be leading a race and run out of fuel. So that's my biggest fear.
Bikes are vastly different now than they used to be even 5 years ago, aren't they? But tell us about how Speedway bikes have changed through the course of your time in Speedway. Did you catch the upright era? Were you able to catch the back end of that or not?
I rode uprights until 97. So 94, 95, 96, I rode uprights. Obviously, they did change the way the bike. They obviously rev a lot harder. I'd say lay downs have probably made it safer because they don't react like uprights did, because obviously you've got a different centre of gravity. If You very rarely now see riders going over the back on the start line, because if you imagine an upright engine, as a bike lifts, all the weight of the engine goes backwards, where I laid down, because it's so low, the weight's there. So you don't tend to get riders going over the back as much. And they certainly don't lift as lift like uprights did mid-corner. But then they've brought out, over the last, say, 10 years, these engines to suit. It's chicken and egg. They changed engines to get faster on slicker tracks. Those engines got better, but then the tracks had to be slick to use those engines, and they've made engines that are better. And it's just a vicious cycle now. And I don't think these modern engines are very good at all. I had a dabble at a couple towards the end of my career and really didn't like them. But again, I'm old school. I imagine riders who've never ridden anything any different wouldn't know any different, but they're horrible to ride. The window of setup is so narrow, where once you had, say, this much, you could do whatever. Now, if you've got to get it right, and if it's not right, the engine's rubbish. So I don't think they've been particularly good for the sport, but that's where we are now, and it's going to be very difficult to get out of that rut.
Yeah, and through the course of a meeting, you mentioned there's very little you can actually change, but what would be the obviously you can change sprockets on the back and so on, but when we hear riders talking about, well, we tried a few things, that's usually as much as you get out of riders in interviews as to what they've done. What kind of things do you ordinarily change if things aren't going your way on a track? I mean, particularly, let's take, for example, the Wolves track and the playoff semi-final. It wasn't a very easy track because of the weather changed things. The track wasn't probably as you would have imagined it was going to be. But what were the sort of things that you were looking at there?
To be fair, we pretty much ran normal setup, and Ryan had a successful meeting. But the riders, I think, tried to baffle you with science a little bit. There's probably only 4 things you can do on a speedway bike at a meeting. You've got ignition, you've got jets, you've got sprockets, and you've got wheel length. After that, there isn't anything else, but it's getting that combination right. Modern riders tend to run longer wheelbase because of the engines, of how they react so violently to anything that the engine doesn't like. And Ryan is more of an ignition, same as I was. I would be changing the ignition a lot during the meeting. So like I say, Wolverhampton, pretty much Monday we ran the same setup. I think we might have had the ignition a little bit lower than normal because of the rain and whatever. But it wasn't cold, so it wasn't like you needed to change there wasn't a lot of moisture in the air to change the jetting. It didn't affect the things like that. So, but I say, riders are always thought, I've got to get this set up. There's not a lot, but it's getting it right. And if you get one bit right but the other's wrong, it doesn't work. So it's just getting that cocktail correct. Ryan doesn't. He certainly doesn't love small tracks. You see him on a big track and he's absolutely majestic. But he enters corners a little bit, not tentatively, but he thinks about what he's doing. Where I would enter a corner with a lot of RPM on and lock the bike up and then sort the problem out there. Ryan tends to come in a bit more gentle, but probably exits the corners faster than, say, I would. So he sets his bike up different to me. So as for me, it's learning over a period of weeks and months or whatever how he does it. And when he tells me it's not doing this, not necessarily going to my toolbox to what I would do. It's learning. We need to do this to help. And in this occasion, occasionally I have not put my foot down, but gone, look, let me just do something. And I think it was Kent. He let me set the bike. We had a magnificent meeting down there. Occasionally he's let me loose, but we've got no idea what we're going to do. So he just lets me go for it.
And obviously you have this really close relationship, particularly with Ryan when it comes to the meetings, but otherwise he's happy to leave you to it, to set his bikes up, and he comes to the meeting, does the job, and then off he goes and leads his life in between time while you sort the bikes out. But obviously some mechanics and riders do it a different way, don't they? And they live together almost like a married couple sometimes through the course of the season.
Yeah, like with Nikolai, when I helped him, I was his only mechanic. So wherever he raced, I was his, in Denmark, if he raced in Germany. So wherever he went, I went. And I lived with him all that year. I lived with him in Denmark. I lived with him here. So that was kind of hard, because we were together so much. Where I said to Ryan at the start of the year, look, he does stay here occasionally. If we've got, say, Scunthorpe on a Friday and Leicester on a Saturday, him and Nick, and we'll stay in. Nick's mechanic, Brad, will do the bikes here. But I said at the start of the year, there's no point having a full-time guy who's going to do all your bikes if you're going to be involved all the while. So he stays with Pete Adams over in Shifnal, and just, let's say, turns up at the meeting, and he doesn't. He told me, said something to me a few weeks ago, which made me quite. Everybody's got an ego, and it tickled mine a little bit. He said, "It's not that I don't think things are going to be done, but I don't have to check with you." He said, "I know it's done," and that's the difference. You'll see some riders, they have to go and they get to the track and they have to make sure this is done. Have you done this? Have you done that? Ryan never really asked me a question, but again, that's probably the ex-rider in me. So he's quite happy. He texted me once, "I'm running late," and I said, "Well, I'm here. As long as you're here by 7:20, you'll be fine." And he kind of, "Oh yeah, I don't need to worry about it." He just jumps on the bike, and races it. But I'm sure that from his side, it probably took him a couple of weeks. I'm quite confident at the start of the relationship he wasn't doing that. He might have been keeping his eye out. Maybe Ryan, doesn't say a lot anyway. It's quite hard to get any words out of him. But I'm sure he was looking and chatting. And after a while, we go, "Well, actually, I know it's been done for the last 10 meetings, so why shouldn't it be done for the 11th?"
Well, fantastic level of trust between the two of you, and as I say, it's obviously a system that's working. David Howe is my guest on Humans of Speedway, and coming next, we're going to delve into David's dream Speedway meeting. Who's going to make his all-time team? Who'll be the opposition? Which track would he choose? And who'd be the referee? And what rule would he mess about with if he could get his hands on the rule book? All to come on Humans of Speedway. You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan. My guest in this episode is David Howe, who's had a rich career right throughout both British and European Speedway, and of course a few GP rounds to his name as well. But right now we're going to find out how his dream team would look, and not just his dream team, but his dream meeting in our Speedway Paradise feature. It's 6 questions, and through them we'll get his ideal track, ideal stadium, his all-time 1 to 7, who'd be the opposition for that team, who'd referee the meeting, what rule would he change? We're going to find all that out in this next part of the podcast. So first up, David, the question for you is, if you were going to be holding your dream Speedway meeting where you can do absolutely anything you desire, because it's all a fantasy, really, which track would you choose for the racing, right? So this can be any track that exists. Doesn't matter about the stadium that it's in or where it is, just purely the shape and the shale. Where are we going?
I couldn't decide out of 2 of them. So I went for the one that I've ridden. The other one was like the Golob years Bydgoszcz. But I've never ridden Bydgoszcz, so I decided to go. I've gone for Linköping in Sweden. I thought it was just a perfectly shaped. It was my first league club over there. Perfect straights for the corners, nice banking, wide. It was just for me. It was the perfect track. It was a perfect track to go and ride on your own. If you go and practice, you had such good fun there. So and to race, obviously, but you just look forward to riding it. So I'd say Linköping in Sweden.
And of course, that was as you mentioned, a place that you've ridden before as well. Reasonably early on in your career. And what was that like, venturing out to foreign lands to ride Speedway, having obviously grown up on the tracks around Britain?
Oh, I love Sweden. I did 10 years out there, and it was Jan Anderson who got me the team place, because obviously I was his teammate at Peterborough, and I just loved it. I know all these, like I say, to ride for Linköping, which was a former Grand Prix track. Yeah, that was, I'm suddenly riding, and it was great, and see all the, I remember going to Harvester one week to watch Ricardson there. I loved it, and I had 10 happy years in Sweden.
Seems to be quite a chill place to watch Speedway. Everybody, when you watch it on the TV, they're all, the weather's usually not. It's usually the tipping down or really perfectly nice, and they're all stood outside, on these bankings in the middle of summer. It looks like a perfect place to watch Speedway for some of the tracks that they've got there.
Yeah, it started to get a bit more like Poland towards the end of my Swedish career, but it was all at the start. It was, don't worry, have a coffee. We'll get the 2 minutes on in a few minutes. Don't worry. So very, very easy going. That's how I love that.
It's the Swedish way. And if we're going to put that track in a stadium, which stadium would you have it in?
Well, it'd be easy to say Cardiff and stuff like that, but I've gone for Torren. The reason being, I think that was possibly one of the first stadium of its type. I remember I went to Torren. I was helping out for the ACU, we were working with the juniors, and I walked onto the centre and I looked and I was like, "Wow, this is made for Speedway. Cardiff isn't made for Speedway; it's a rugby stadium." And I stood there and I could not believe that was a Speedway stadium. I know there's been a few and more are following in Poland, but it just blew my mind. And it's, so I'll go for Torren.
Yeah, cleverly designed. Per Jonsson was involved in building it, wasn't he? And it's a lovely track, but as you say, the stadium itself, and it's got the tops of the stands come out over the track, I think, a bit, don't they, to protect it from the rain, which is just such an obvious thing to put in a Speedway stadium, isn't it?
Yeah, so, like I say, remember walking, you come down the back and walk through that tunnel, and suddenly it opens up. I was like, oh, wow. I don't know whether you get the same feeling if you're sitting in the stands, but when you walk onto that track, it's just mind-blowing.
Your all-time 1 to 7 then. You can have any rider from any era, no points limits. You can have them doubling up as much as you like. So we'll just run through them, really, and we'll go through from 1 to 7. So who would be in your all-time team?
Well, I've done a few of these, but I've always done riders who I've either had a connection with or I've ridden with. But this time I've gone for, like I say, the team that I would like to see.
Yeah, the team to win. Your all-time worldies, whoever it was. Up to you.
Yeah. Well, I think this one's pretty good then. I can't have any team without having Ricardson in it.
Yeah.
It's just a given for me. It's the first time I met Tony, I think I was 9. It was at Mildenhall in the winter. It was the first practice I was having of the year. The first time I hadn't been riding very long. And I think Ross Pagano were travelling. They had a touring team over. And for some reason, my bike wouldn't start. Something was wrong with it. And this guy came up and made a fuss of me, tried to help getting the bike going, but something wrong with the battery or something. And I didn't even know who he was, but I could remember the sponsors on his legs. It was like really nice to me. And, because I was a bit upset that I didn't get to have a ride, and I went home and looking through Speedway, I was like, that was Tony Ricardson. And from that moment on, he was it'd be about 91. So he might have even then have had his first podium in Gothenburg. Certainly wasn't the Tony that he became. And from then on, he was my favourite rider because of that, because he tried to make me feel a bit better.
And you'll have raced against him in the Grand Prix, of course, but did you race against him when he was racing in the British League, like when he was in the Ipswich 98 team that, we were talking with Chris Louis in the previous episode to this, of course, about that. But did you race against him then at all?
No, I was only 16 then. I certainly can remember that team, and I can remember they were coming to Coventry one night, and I said, "Dad, God, I've got to go and see the Ipswich team because they were just phenomenal, weren't they?"
Yeah, absolutely, and probably unlikely to see a team quite like that ever again. Let's move on to the rest of your team right now. Then, who's at number 2?
And I think with this team, I'm going to alienate any Wolves fans that I may still have. I'm just proving. So number 2, I'll probably we'll go for Bruce Pennell. I never saw him race. I've been fortunate to have met him and spoke to him, but I've certainly watched a lot of videos and what of him, and and what he did, in Los Angeles, and retiring then. It's a bit iconic, isn't it, in the Speedway? But, I think he had that glamour, that the colours and the riding style. Yeah, I'd love to have seen him at his best.
I have very, very, very faint memories of seeing Bruce Pennell ride at Halifax, and probably like the earliest memories I have of Speedway when I was probably about 4 or 5, and it must have been just before he jacked it in, racing against Kenny Carter, and probably around the time he was winning the World Championship, if not already won it. But it was more about the showbiz that came with him rather than, I can't remember the races, but it was just such a big occasion that Bruce Pennell was here, and he was just such, I don't think we have a rider, I don't think even Schmarslik gets anywhere close to the level of celebrity that Bruce Pennell had at that time. It was such a big deal.
So I never saw him race, but I've seen plenty of him, and like you say, it's just everything about the. I think it was not just Bruce. A lot of the Americans had the colours and the nice leathers and whatnot at the time. But for me, that photo of him on the podium at Los Angeles is something I remember from as a kid. It's quite an iconic photo. So yeah, Bruce has got to be there.
And then he went off to be in Chips.
Yeah.
And he managed to get Speedway into that as well. I think in one episode he was riding a Speedway bike in the car park dressed as a California highway patrolman. Okay, so Bruce Pennell, Tony Rickardson, and who's next?
Another rider I never got to see, but luckily to have spent a bit of time with, and would be Eric Gunderson.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, again, someone I've watched a lot, and I remember sitting down at a hotel with Eric in Torren, and I was asking a lot about his career, his long track career and all the stuff he did. And lovely guy, great to chat to, and obviously his career was cut short, and who knows what he would have gone on to do. But from what he did, it was brilliant. He
was just one of these riders that was practically unbeatable at the time. He was just. Whenever I saw him at Bradford, I think a couple of times, and he was. This was at a time when you had like people like Gary Havelock and so on, who earlier in their career, of course, but who were practically unbeatable on that track at that time as well. But you just knew that there was nobody was anywhere close to him. He was just such a phenomenal rider.
And I think if any Speedway fan been on YouTube, you've seen the video of him. Is it passing? Is it Lance? In the World Final at 85, when he comes last to first in pretty much one bend, that's just phenomenal.
As you say, what he would have gone on to do, certainly more world titles, that would have been for sure. So Eric Gunderson, next.
Billy Hamill, again, another crazy rider. This is why Wolves fans will not like me any. But he was a bit like Tony, really. My relationship with Billy, that he was quite helpful to me when I was. He doesn't even remember it. I was at Stoke, and he came up to me one day, and he said, "Oh, you're going to be here next week?" And I went, "Yeah, I'll be here." And he went, "I've got a load of stuff that I'm just throwing out the workshop," and he gave me a load. There was boots, there was covers, there was blood, and he just, and. Again, Billy at the time, I remember he had the Troy Lee design eyeball down the side of his leathers, and there were and he was a bit wild on a bike, and the pre-96 where he had a bit more finesse when he, that early Billy was it was fun to watch, and obviously he went on to be world champion that year, and he was phenomenal. But I remember the 93, 94, 95 Billy was a bit more wild.
Yeah, and then there was like the X-Side years and all that, wasn't there, with Greg Hancock, and sort of really way ahead of their time as well, weren't they? In terms of particularly he and Greg Hancock, but Billy Hamill ahead in terms of marketing and getting. Like especially digital marketing, having websites and things like that on his helmet and all that kind of stuff, which now is pretty commonplace for riders. But I think he was one of the first to have really latched onto all of that kind of future technology and stuff. And his mechanic, isn't it right? Or one of his mechanics, his former mechanics, is helping Tom Brennan now as well, I believe.
Craig,
yeah.
And also one of his other mechanics helps. One of the I'm not going to tell you which one because I can't tell them apart. The Thompsons at Leicester.
Ah, right. Okay. So, well,
Shepard help.
The Billy Hamill empire continues in some form then.
Yeah, Billy's still now. I speak to him occasionally. I was his teammate in Sweden, and I did a year or two teammate at Wolverhampton with him, and he's just a genuinely nice bloke. Still nothing. He's never changed. So and I say if you're going to pick a dream team, I think the '96 Billy Hamill would be pretty hard to beat. Be right in there.
Oh yeah, top class stuff. So Billy Hamill then, and your fifth choice.
Now I am leaping back. I'm going to pick Ivan purely because I was raised on an unleavened diet of how good Ivan Major was from my dad. And he was always this. He was the ultimate professional. I remember him coming to grass tracks and doing it was just Ivan. And I was again. I've been very lucky. I stayed at Ivan's house in Australia for a few weeks when I was young and did his couple of long track tours. But you can't deny what Ivan did for the sport in the mid '60s. Through to the mid '80s and even beyond, he was still involved in helping riders, in Australia. And how can you not pick a dream team without if not the best riders that's ever graced our sport?
Well, surely he is the greatest, and certainly in terms of world titles, it's still a feat that's yet to be surpassed, isn't it? I know that Ty Woofenden's got his eye on that, but he's still got quite a way to go yet.
Yeah, and I think if you're a historian, when I think that nobody's won 3 in a row since. I mean, you think when he won that third one in Katowice, going to Poland at the time was really difficult for Western riders, and he went there and did it, and just different era, completely different bikes, everything was different. But if you think same as like Brigo, I suppose they raced through so many decades and eras. Things changed. We talk about now uprights to laid downs, but they're still basically the same bike, same engine. They went from the Japs to the Jawas to the Weslakes, 4 valves. The sport changed, but they were still at the top every change they made.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal, and then it ties kind of nicely in with where we started, I suppose, as well with Peter Oakes, because he was his manager and best friend for many years, and was part of that at the time, wasn't he? And must have been great experience to tap into as well in your early years. So Ivan Major, in some form or other, sort of runs through it, doesn't it?
Yeah, as I say, from a young lad, it was always Ivan. So I had to pick it.
All right, then. 2 left then. 6 and 7.
Number 6 will be Chris Louis. Chris was, at the time, I think you were either a Mark Loram or a Chris Louis fan. I was a Chris Louis fan because I liked the more technical. I thought he was a bit more technical. And I remember him coming, when I was a kid, him coming to Peterborough, like 94, 95. And he was phenomenal around there, and certainly around Ipswich. He was brilliant. And I just liked the way he went about his business. Someone I think, Mark, absolutely lovely guy, brilliant, obviously world champion. But if you wanted to, out the two, go to a kid, Chris, act like and ride like Chris Louis, or act and ride like Mark Loram, I think you pick Chris Louis because he was, as I say, a bit more technical. More of a gator, where Mark was, from a fan, you want to watch him more than Chris Louis. But for me, I've always been a bit strange and looked past past the stuff and try and look what they're doing behind the scenes. And Chris was someone I always liked watching.
Well, I know that Chris Louis thanks you for including him in your team, so that's got to be good news. Okay, then, and one more. Then, who's at number 7?
Number 7, I'm going completely the other direction because he's somebody I love to watch. I think he must be exhausted after a meeting. He's every inch of the track, and he must be hard to mechanic for because he drains every single piece of horsepower out the bike, and that is Bartosz Marszlik.
He does really work the bike hard, doesn't he? And the stuff he does on. I mean, you talk about these bikes now; they're not as nice to ride, perhaps, as previous bikes might have been. I know other riders have said that they're so volatile in how they react to tracks, but yeah, he makes it seem like he's riding a BMX sometimes, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he looks like he has a full body workout during the race, doesn't he? There's not a part of the bike he doesn't sit on, stretch, do it. He's just. I don't think we haven't seen a rider like you see a special rider every once in a while. The Mike Lees, Kelly Moran's, Darcy Ward's. Bartosz is there, I think. What makes him faster than everybody else? Because these engines, as you say, there's not a lot you can do with them. Apparently, he's on engines that are tuned by the same guy that Ty has and Saifutinov, so they're on effectively, very similar engines, but yet he seems to get an extra 5 mile an hour out of it, doesn't he? He's got a knack of turning off the fence as well and make it, say, where riders peel into a corner, doesn't peel, he kind of moves and makes another straight. So he gets like an extra 2 meters with the wheels in line, and he's just brave as well. There's not a part of the track he won't ride. He pulls lines that, if he'd have been around 20 years ago, would probably have been questioning how dangerous he is. But because of the way that the tracks in Poland developed and they've got wider and stuff, I think he's come along at the right time for that. But I think, like I say, 20 years ago, I think riders would go Bartosz, he's passed me over gate 2. Where back then everybody went to the outside of the straight. Now, I think he's transformed how riders approach Speedway. Yeah, just not obeying the previous rules and just getting that bike round the track. So, fantastic lineup then. Tony Rickardson, Bruce Pennell, Eric Gunderson, Billy Hamill, Ivan Major, Chris Louis and Bartosz Marszlik. That's going to be a hell of a team to beat, has to be said. Who's going to referee the meeting? Graham Reeve. Okay. Somebody who was very, very helpful to me in my early years in the under-21s. I'd like to pick Tony Steele because he's somebody I get on very well with and have a lot of respect for, but I've still not forgiven him for excluding me in 1999 in a British semi-final when I didn't knock Carl Stonier off. So I've not quite forgiven Tony for that, and I do mention it to him every time I see him. So I can't pick Tony. But no, Graham, he was just somebody. He came to my wedding. He was just a friend. He became a friend in the end, and unfortunately, he's not in the best of health at the moment. So I wish him and Leslie all the best. But he was somebody. He was the England under-21 manager. I remember when I first qualified to go and race in an under-21 round, I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah, but Graham sorted it all out for me, and so as a referee, I think he refereed my testimonial as well, so he can referee my dream meet. Oh,
that's nice, and all the best to Graham Reeve as well. If we're going to change a rule though for your referee to implement for the betterment of the sport, which rule would you be the first to tweak with?
Well, I could keep going on this forever, but I've narrowed it down to 2. I've got a pie in the sky rule, which I don't think will ever happen, and one that I think should. The pie in the sky rule, I think there should only be one rule book, one format, one rule book for all the major leagues. I don't understand why some places have 15 heats, some have 14, some have 6, some have 5 riders, some have 7. You don't go, right, Manchester United are playing Real Madrid tonight, but we only actually play 85 minutes in Spain. And but Bayern Munich play 120 and they only have 9 men on the pitch. again, this is the back I was talking to before, making it more simple for new people to understand. So I think one rule book that everybody follows, that, all the main, Sweden, Denmark, Poland, UK, and obviously France is getting a league together, adhere to. I think that would make sense. But I think the rule that I think should change, and again, I see this from a rider side and a mechanic side. For a first starting offence, i.e. movement at the tapes, it should only be 1 minute. There shouldn't be a 2 minutes. There's no need for it. If the rider's already on track, can't get to the start line and get ready in 1 minute, he shouldn't be out there. So that keeps the meeting flowing, keeps the fans happy. There's no need for a 2 minutes, I don't believe. So that's just a little tweak I would make.
Yeah, well, 1 minute's more than enough time to just do a quick coast around the track and back to the start again, isn't it?
Of course.
And even if you needed a quick splash of fuel, you probably can. Even if you've managed to run your tank out. I mean, how long will a tank last? If you've got your tank filled up, how many laps are you going to get out of a bike?
Depends on obviously the size of the track, and we tend to run small, just enough fuel tanks now for weight reasons. But a track like say Peterborough, you probably get 6 laps. Smaller tracks, you get 6 to 8.
So you're not going to just coasting round back to the start again. You're not really making a big dent into that, are you?
No. Yeah, if there's a second starting offence, the clutches get warm, things like that. But first offence, back to the start, get that race on, and get cracking.
It's interesting because pretty much I would say 80-90% of the times we've done this, when we talk about changing a rule, it's always something to do with the start. It seems to be like the main area of Speedway that's of contention. Even when we've spoken to referees and what have you, it's the starts.
I've got absolutely no problem with the 2 minutes. I know some fans, riders shouldn't be doing this on the start line. You got to remember, it's a rider's job. So he's got to give himself the best opportunity. And if that rider doesn't perform, that same fan won't be very happy. So that rider has to give himself the best possible opportunity to get from A to B faster than the other riders. So as a rider as well, I've got 2 minutes. If I want to take 1 minute 59, I'll take 1 minute 59. If I want to take 1 minute, I'll take 1 minute. But that's 2 minutes from when the 2 minutes comes on to get to the start line. Well, if you're already on track, you haven't been pushed off, you haven't done you're already out there. So just go straight back and get on with the job.
And when riders do get down to the tapes, just explain some of maybe the mind games that go on in that, while the 2 minutes is winding down until the start marshal, manages to get everybody to tapes. Because you always, regularly in a meeting, you'll see one rider who always wants to be last to the tapes, or that one rider who looks like they're ready and then they back their bike out and disappear back off down the track again and then come back in. And it's sort of a ritual, isn't it, as well as that? But mind games, I suppose, with your competitors too.
I think every rider's got their own little, quirks. If you notice Artem Laguta, he always turns around and comes. The last thing he does is he turns around and comes back to that line. The actual gardening, though, I don't believe there's any kidology in that. I think that's all the rider trying to get the best. But you do tend to see riders who are taking longer gardening. It's normally because if I was sitting on the start line watching a rider carrying on, I'd be thinking, well, he's not particularly happy with where he is, and I'm all happy, I'm ready. So that for me would be a mental boost. Watching Ryan, I see him, if he's taking up the whole of the 2 minutes, it means he hasn't found a spot that he's particularly happy with. So that can set alarm bells ringing for me.
And finally, you've got your team of worldies. Who's going to be the opposition now? The opposition is an actual team that has existed at some point in time.
Well, I was going to pick the Ipswich 98 team, but I've now realised I've got a doubling up clash and also a 6-man versus 7-man team. So I might have... Now, what I would do, I was going to stick Mark Laram in the Ipswich, but what I would do, I'll make it... To go for my rulebook format, every league has the same. We'll run 6-man team, and Chris Louis can hop back over to the Ipswich 98 team from my team.
Very good, very good.
So Chris can stay with the Ipswich team, and I'll run my other 6. Oh no, I've got another problem.
What's that?
Ricardson's riding for both teams.
Oh, Oh, man. Okay.
Well, it's a fancy league, so we'll just go with it.
Tony Rickardson's having a busy night.
He's having a busy.
Tony Rickardson doubling up, and yeah, still a fantastic team, of course, and yours is brilliant as well. But thanks very much, David. It's been great chatting with you, and all the very best for the rest of this season. And looking ahead to next year, have you got any plans yet as to what next year might hold as yet?
Not really. I think if anything, with everything, it would 100% be with Ryan. But we'll just got to get through this year first. Ryan said he's happy with me. I'm happy with Ryan. So if I was carrying on doing what I'm doing, it would definitely be with Ryan and nobody else.
My thanks to David Howe for joining us in this episode of Humans of Speedway. Don't forget to follow or subscribe whichever app you use to listen to us on. Make sure you follow or subscribe to us to make sure that you get the next episode delivered to your device as soon as it becomes available. And listen to some of the previous episodes too. If you haven't listened to our most recent one prior to this episode, which was with Chris Louis, please do check that one out. It's a great episode. Also, we spoke to Dennis McCleary earlier this year, and David was talking about Berwick Bandits. One of the reasons that Berwick is such a lovely club is because of the lovely man that is Dennis McCleary, who has been involved with Speedway in Berwick since 1969 and still going strong. Hear his story on one of the previous episodes. We also spoke to Jeremy Doncaster, Shane Parker, Kelvin Tatum, and Peter Oakes, who we mentioned in this episode as well, who one of the big reasons that Peterborough had all that success many years ago in the 90s. Hear from Peter Oakes himself in one of our previous episodes, all available on whichever podcast app you prefer to use or on your smart speaker. And we'll be back with another episode of Humans of Speedway very soon.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.